Good day, everyone. For today, we are going to talk about the political self. And in doing so, we are going to discuss two important topics in understanding the self. The first thing that you should know about in political self are the theories of leadership. And I'm going to discuss what makes a leader an excellent leader and what are the factors that hinder him from becoming a good leader. Okay, and then in the second part of this discussion, we are going to talk about our Filipino values. And since I'm coming from the perspective of psychology, what I'm going to do is we're going to redefine these values. And perhaps you haven't realized these criticisms about the existing definitions of the Filipino values, so it would allow us to have a greater understanding of our Filipino values. So with that, we can begin. First, let's look at these questions so that we can reflect on them and I'll try to answer them with my expertise. So the first one is that why is it easy for some people to convince others to follow them? And as a teacher, I've been very observant on the behaviors of my students, and I've noticed that there are students who are interested in becoming student leaders, while there are some who tend to say no on responsibilities. I myself have been a student leader before, and what is it that separates student leaders from non-student leaders? I guess it's the willingness to lead and it's the confidence that one can be a good leader. Okay, and at the same time, those people who lead others are also equipped with the right skills to to be excellent in what they do. For example, I know that I will be a good leader because I'm a good public speaker, and I can tell people what are my insights so that they can give me feedback about what I think, and I can get suggestions from people. I can speak in front of so many people, and I can tell them about the plans of our organization. Okay, and on the other hand, there are individuals who are not so good when it comes to speaking what they think, and there are some individuals who just don't want to have responsibilities, may that be in school, may that be at work. So they tend to avoid extracurricular activities. That's why they avoid leadership situations. Okay, in my case, I decided to be a leader because it would give me experience. Especially, what if someday I become a manager, or someday I become a someone with a high position? My advantage is that I had experience in leading groups in the various stages of my life, and I know what it feels to lead a student, to lead co-workers, okay, and to lead others or strangers, okay. So it's easy for me to convince people to follow what I think. It's perhaps because of my assertiveness and because I'm the kind of person who knows how to speak in front of others. And the next is that why is it easy for some people to get convinced? Now we're talking about personality, okay, and culture as well. And remember our discussion in the South from the Eastern and Western thought. Remember that we endorse a collectivistic culture rather than an individualistic one. And here in the Philippines, since we are very collectivist, we give so much importance to respect, while some neighboring countries give importance to honor, okay, and respect as well. For example, Japan and China, etc. Okay? And for us, since we give so much attention to respect, respecting elders, respecting adults, it's easy for us to conform or to follow leaders. Okay? Because for us, following or conforming is something that is labeled as desirable. Okay? So a Filipino trait of being masunurin, or someone who knows how to follow others, is labeled or considered as a good trait to have. Unlike in Western countries which are more individualistic, they don't like conformity, but rather they emphasize being unique or expressing what is it that you think. Okay, so there are some cultural factors affecting that one. Other than that, I would think that from the perspective of psychology, one more thing that can influence being easily convinced is our level of agreeableness. And agreeableness is one of the traits in the big five or the ocean. I guess you have encountered that in your other subjects. And If you are high in agreeableness, in layman's term, you're the kind of person who wants to avoid conflicts. So that what you're going to do is just to follow without raising any question. And I guess that if you're low in agreeableness, then you're the person who are more likely to complain or speak out your mind or to criticize. Okay, perhaps Filipinos are more likely to be agreeable than not agreeable. Okay? Because we value relationships over uniqueness. Okay? And that can be good and that can be bad as well. Okay? And look at this. What are the person's traits and values that impact his political self? I guess I was able to somehow answer this already in the past two questions, like things like assertiveness. Other than that, we also value what we call extraversion. Leaders are more likely than non-leaders to be extroverted or to be influential, to be charismatic. Okay, and I don't want you to think that if you're an introvert, there's no way for you to become a leader anymore. Because in my case, I'm an introvert, but when it comes to leadership situations, that's where I excel. Okay? And my level of introversion is not that high. Okay? I am in the lower side of introversion. Okay? Near the middle or near the side of extroversion. Okay? So I'm not that introvert, hence, I could easily transition from different situations. Again, there are situations wherein I will stay quiet, while there are situations wherein I will speak in front of others in attempt to influence them. Okay? And values are very important as well. Like if you value leadership or if you value being powerful, then you're more likely to go for leadership positions. Okay, so now that we have been talking about leadership, first let's talk about the perspective of the followers, okay? So like what I told you earlier, here in an Eastern country, here in a collectivistic culture, we value conformity or following others or conforming to others. And when we say conformity, that is a change in your attitude, belief, or behavior so that your behavior, attitude, and belief will fit the attitudes of others. Okay, for example, at first you don't like to eat because you're not hungry, but you notice that other people around you, all of them are eating. So just to fit into that situation, you're going to eat as well. Okay, that's why sometimes you feel like you're being forced to do things even though at first you didn't want to do them. Okay, and there are two motives of social influence, and these are two reasons why we conform to others according to social psychology. And the first one is normative influence. When we say normative influence, we conform so that we can we can fit with the expectation of others, or we can avoid punishment. So you do something so that you will fit with what others are doing, or you can avoid punishment. For example, in school, you're quiet because if you started making noise, then you're going to get punished, and that is what you call normative influence. On the other hand, we also have what we call informational influence, or you conform based on accepting the information obtained from others as evidence of reality. Okay, for example, you do we wash our hands because doctors, because mental health professionals have told us that washing our hands are something that we must do in order for us to be hygienic. So you're not doing it just to please others, but rather you're doing it because there's evidence that it would really help you if you perform that behavior. Okay, so think about it. What is the reason why you conform to different things? Is it because of normative or is it because of informational? Okay. And I guess in the classroom, both of these may manifest. For example, sometimes you are behaved because you don't want others to think to you don't want to be punished. And sometimes you also there's also informational influence, or you believe what your teacher is saying because others believe it as well, at the same time because you think that it is a fact, or there's an evidence supporting the claims of your teacher. Okay, now let's talk about leadership. So when we say leadership, it is the process by which a certain group members motivate and guide the group. Okay, so when we say leadership, maybe you're thinking that someone needs to be at the top of the group for him or her to be influential. However, let me tell you that when we say leadership, you can be a leader in your own little ways. Okay, for example, you can be a leader in the family even though you're not the breadwinner. Okay, you can exercise leadership with your friends even though you're not labeled as a leader. Basically, having leadership skills will not only be beneficial when you're a leader, it can also be beneficial to you even though in non-leadership situations. Okay, and these are some desirable characteristics to have, like being assertive, or asking for opinions of others, or giving instructions. These are very, very important leadership characteristics. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to talk about some theories of leadership, and I want you to understand yourself, and try to interpret your attitudes based on these different theories of leadership. So basically, if you if you ever wanted to be a leader before, try to think what was the motivation behind your leadership motivation, okay, and what are the influences, and try to align them with what I'm going to discuss in the theories of leadership. The first one is that, according to David McClelland, we have three psychological needs. Okay? And according to him, the needs are the need for power. For example, you have a need for power. For example, if you're the eldest sibling or you want to be a leader in the classroom, if you're a teacher, you have a need for power because you want others to follow what you want. If you're in politics, you need to have a high need for power. Other than that, we also have what we call a need for affiliation, or this is the desire to please others, desire to be liked. Okay, for example, you express your talents. For example, singing, you do that so that a lot of people will like you. Okay, not necessarily be afraid of you like in need for power, but rather in need for affiliation, you want to please others or you want others to like you. Okay, and in the need for achievement, that is the need for you to 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 reach your goals, okay, to be competitive, and that's how you fulfill your need for achievement. So according to McClelland, every one of us have has these needs, okay, and each person manifests these needs in a different way. For example, person A may have a high need for affiliation, while person B may have a low need for affiliation. And according to McClelland, what makes a leader? According to him, a leader is someone with high need for power. Okay, so that's necessary for you to be a leader, and at the same time, a very low need for affiliation. So in other words, what is McClelland trying to tell us? He's trying to tell us that in order for you to be an effective leader, you should be the type of leader who has a need for power, or someone who can command others, but at the same time, you should also be the type of leader who doesn't want to please everyone. Okay, because you know this, if you have become a leader before, it's hard to please everyone, and if you try to please everyone, then you're not going to be productive. Hence, what McClellan is telling us is that it's just normal for an effective leader to be someone who is disliked, to be someone that doesn't please everyone, as long as he has a high need for power. Okay? I'm afraid if someone wants to be a leader, not because of need for power, but because of need for affiliation. So what does a leader with a high need for affiliation looks like? Maybe he's the type of leader who just pursue leadership situations just to get followers. Not necessarily for need for power, but rather he or she just wants to be liked. Okay, a people pleaser, and that's not an effective way to lead others. So remember, if I ask you, okay, in one of your exams, an effective leader, according to McClelland, is someone who has a high need for power and a low need for affiliation. Here's another theory of leadership. According to Chan and Raskow back in 2001, here are three types of motivation patterns, or basically it answers the question, why do you lead? Okay, and the first one is affective identity motivation, meaning you lead because you want to be in charge and you want to lead others. So basically that's a given. In order for you to be a leader, you want to be in charge. Okay, you want to be a manager, you want to be an executive, or you want to be a director. Okay, so that's the affective identity motivation. However, not all people want to lead because they want to be in charge. And let's take a look at number 2 and 3. Okay, these are the examples of what I'm talking about. In number 2, that's the non-calculative motivation. So they only seek leadership positions because of a personal gain. For example, I'm a teacher and then I ask you to group yourselves and then I tell you that the leader will automatically get extra credits or an exemption in a quiz. Then maybe that will be the reason for you to lead. Not because you want to be a leader, but because you want to get something that will benefit you, your selfish desire. So that's the non calculative motivation. So it's hard to be a subordinate of someone who has a non calculative motivation. The next one is what we call social normative motivation, or the desire to lead out of a sense of duty or responsibility. So they may not like being a leader, but they have to lead because it's their responsibility. For example, the eldest sibling in the family will become the leader because he's the eldest and he needs to lead the group or the family when it comes to decision making, financial matters, budgeting, etc. So they may not be so happy about their role in the family, but they need to because it's their responsibility. And one more example of leading out of social normative motivation is for example, you have a family business and then your parents would like to retire and they want you to handle the family business, but you're not really into business. For example, you want arts, but because no one else will take care of the business, you have to do it. That's what we call social normative motivation. So according to research in industrial organizational psychology, the best leaders in this theory are those who have affective identity motivation. Okay, I'm not saying that 2 and 3 are not effective, but they are perceived as less effective compared to number 1. Okay? So according to the first theory that we talk about, the one according to McClelland, the best leaders are those with high need for power and low need for affiliation. While in this theory, you learn that those who have a desire to be in charge are those who are perceived as the best leaders. So you can see some differences from one theory to another. Here is another theory of leadership, and this is the path goal theory according to House. Okay, and House's path goal theory told us that there are 4 types of leadership: instrumental, supportive, participative, and achievement. Basically, this talks about the level of involvement a leader has with his subordinates. So those with instrumental type of leadership are the types of leaders who plan and organizes for their subordinates, meaning they are the leaders who give directives. They are the leaders who organize things for their subordinates. Basically, they give opportunities. Okay. For example, you're the boss in the organization and you want me to become to be able to finish my doctoral. So you give me a plan to follow in order for me to get a doctoral degree. Okay. We also have what we call supportive leaders, or those who show their concern to their subordinates. Those who ask their subordinates, how are you doing? Or are you happy with your job? Okay, so they're empathic types of leaders. We also have what we call participative. When we say participative leaders, whenever there's a decision making circumstance, they allow their subordinates to participate in decision making. So they always ask for suggestions. Other than that, there's also what we call achievement oriented, basically similar to McClelland's need for achievement, or those who set challenges and rewards achievement. Okay, so I want you to classify yourself. What type of a leader are you? Okay, and I want you to know that different types of leadership motivation may be effective in different scenarios, and there's no such thing as one size fits all type of leadership. You can't be effective in all the scenario, but rather you have to be able to be flexible in your leadership approach in order for you to lead in a certain situation. Or sometimes you have to give up the leadership role to someone else who would be more effective in that situation. Okay, and now let's talk about the second part of this lecture, which is rethinking Filipino values from the perspective of Psikolohiyang Pilipino, or Filipino psychology. And Filipino values are included in understanding the self, but since I'm from the psychology field, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use the lens of Filipino psychology or cultural psychology in evaluating our values. And my references from this would be Psikolohiyang Pilipino articles. especially the ones that are authored by the father of Psikolohiyang Filipino, which is Dr. Virgilio Enriquez. So let us begin. Okay, so let me begin with these questions. Okay, the colonial influence. So the first question is that, do you know why Filipinos do not like to sit in front or near the stage during events? So have you noticed that? For example, you're a teacher, you will notice that your students in the first day of classes, they would like to sit at the back but not in front. Okay, and why is that happening? It's because one possible explanation will somehow be an evolutionary kind of explanation. It's because during the time of the Spaniards, Filipinos are forced to sit at the back because the front seats are reserved for the Spaniards. So evolutionary wise, we've been able to bring these traits until the present. That's why sometimes we think that we do not deserve to sit in front. And that happens subconsciously. And you're not really aware about it. Okay. And this is something that I observe for quite some time, that Filipinos would prefer sitting at the back rather than in front. Okay. Other than that, do you know the difference between these dishes? Afritada, mechado, menudo, and caldereta. And as a Filipino, I would guess that only a few of you will be able to answer this question. And there's an explanation about this from the perspective of Filipino psychology. It's because these meals are from the Spanish influence, from the Spaniards. That's why we don't know what they mean, because they are not Filipino words then, or they are not Tagalog words. That's why we don't know the differences between these dishes. Okay, and now maybe you're more conscious that you will now know why is it that it's hard for us to memorize the differences between these. Okay, and I want you to be aware that even until today, even though the colonizers are no longer present in our country, they are still present psychologically, and they continue to influence what we do. Just like, for example, I am delivering my lecture in English, although our primary language is Filipino, and that's because of the American influence in our country. Okay, and what do you think about these values? Okay, I don't think that they are really values, but more of the negative characteristics. Filipino time? What is Filipino time? This is a Filipino characteristic wherein if you invite someone, okay, he or she may be late, sometimes 1 hour or 2 hours. And that's Filipino time. It's because most of the time we experience a lot of delays here in the Philippines. For example, queuing in line or for waiting for the train. Okay, and those are some things that may influence Filipino time. Okay. Other than that, we also have what we call crab mentality, or when someone is at the top, we have the tendency to pull him down. For example, if someone is winning in a contest, then you're going to see some envious people in the comment section saying that he's not really that good. Okay? And that's crab mentality. And other than that, we also have colonial mentality, or believing that anything that came from the Spaniards, Americans are better than those that are more Filipino. Okay? So that's colonial mentality, or a preference for something that did not come from our own culture. Okay? So these are characteristics that describe a Filipino, but the criticism about these is that from the perspective of Psikolohiyang Filipino, they're saying that although these characteristics describe the Filipino, they don't think it's accurate because these are English words. Okay, and in order for us to describe a Filipino accurately, we need to use the Filipino language, okay, not these English words. And they also think that this is because of the colonial influence, and this is also because um, these descriptions does not really come from the Filipino, but rather these are the descriptions that come from outsiders. Okay, and in order for us to understand the real characteristic of a Filipino, we should use Filipino words. And let's take a look at those values. Okay, now what I want us to do is to let's take a look at these values, and according to Virgilio Enriquez, we need to rethink the definition of these values, and maybe the definitions coming from coming from our um, fellow Filipinos may be inaccurate. Okay, and we need to redefine these values in a positive way. Okay, for example, hiya is something that a Filipino would feel when he or she is uncomfortable, or when he or she feels that he doesn't deserve that kind of positive treatment. For example, if I'm a stranger and then you do something good for me, or for example, I'm going to visit someone else's house, okay, I may not be that comfortable because we feel what we call hiya. However, hiya is not something negative. It's not the same with shame or guilt, but rather it's a sense of propriety. What do we mean by that? When we feel hiya, it doesn't mean we feel shameful or we feel guilty, but rather because of hiya, we have a sense of propriety, or we know how to act in a certain situation. For example, when there are visitors in our house or in any other Filipino household, we act in a different manner compared to how we act if there's no visitor in the house. And that's just the positive kind of hiya. Okay? And hiya is not something that we should define negatively, but rather we should acknowledge how positive this trait is. Okay? And it's a very important characteristic for a Filipino to have. Okay? Other than that, we also have what we call bahala na, which came from bathala na, and bathala is God. Okay? And when we say bahala na, it means that you know that you have done everything and God will do the rest for you. So, contrary to the common misconception, bahala na is not fatalism. It's not giving up, but rather bahala na is risk taking and determination. Okay, it means that you know that you have done your part. Okay, and you will just ask for God's help in order for you to be able to do your best. Okay? It's not fatalism. It's not about giving up. Okay? And contrary to the common misconception, if we say bahala na, we are not being passive, but rather, according to Psikolohiyang Pilipino, we are being active. For example, you're going to take a board exam or a licensure exam. You say bahala na because you know that you have done your best and God will do the rest for you. You're not just giving up, but rather you say bahala na because it means that you're still going to do your best and hoping that God will guide you along the way. Other than that, we also have what we call utang na loob. So when we say utang na loob, utang is similar to the word debt in English, but utang na loob is not necessarily a debt or a burden. Okay, it's not necessarily a debt of gratitude, but rather remove the word debt and retain the word gratitude. It's also solidarity. Okay? And utang na loob allows us to have a greater connection with each other. Because when we say that you have an utang na loob towards someone else, you're not necessarily in debt to him or her, but rather you're going to do your best to repay him by being nice to him or her. Okay, and unlike Americans, we don't say, I owe you one, and now we're even because we don't count how many favors. Okay, how many favors that we have done for each other. Okay, we just do nice things to each other and we don't count it. Okay, and that is the value of utang na loob. Okay, and our core value as Filipinos would be kapwa or pakikipagkapwa, and by definition, kapwa is the shared inner self. Meaning, if I tell you that you're my kapwa, it means that I see myself in you, shared inner self. And according to Virgilio Enriquez, everybody should be considered a kapwa, and there's no such thing as not a kapwa or hindi kapwa because everyone is considered kapwa. And if you know pakikipagkapwa, then that's positive because the negative side is walang kapwa. Okay? Because according to Virgilio Enriquez, the moment that you stop being a kapwa to someone else or being a fellow to someone else, you also stop being a Filipino. Also, you also stop being a human. So this is the core of our humanity, being a fellow to another human being. Okay? And the two types of kapwa are ibang tao and hindi ibang tao. Basically, ibang tao are the strangers or the relatives that you're not so close with. Basically, in the first day of school, you feel that there are a lot of ibang tao or or not one of us. Okay, that's the right translation, not one of us. While hindi ibang tao is translated as one of us. Okay, and who are considered hindi ibang tao? These are your family members, these are your closest friends. And basically, according to Dr. Enriquez, our level of pakikipagkapwa differ, okay, depending on the classification. Is this a person ibang tao o hindi ibang tao? So eventually, the more exposure you have with that person, the more that you build rapport, the more you consider him as hindi ibang tao. Okay, and in Filipino setting, when we do research, it's important for us to be considered as hindi ibang tao in order for the person to disclose personal information. That's why it's very important for us to build rapport before doing research in the Filipino setting, according to um, Filipino psychology. So basically, that is our discussion for the political self. I hope that you learned a lot about our different types of leaders and the different types of values that we carry, and we were influenced by our colonizers. Okay, and I want you to be aware that the values that we have are not so negative after all, but let's look at the positive side of the equation. I hope that you learned a lot, and I hope that you'll be able to understand more about yourself, from specifically your political self, based on your leadership characteristics and based on the Filipino values that you carry. So that's it for this discussion, and thank you.